I'm Gabe Ignetti, and this is the Eco-Modernist Soapbox. We have with us today Zion Light. Zion Light was a spokesperson for Extinction Rebellion UK and the founder of its climate reporting newspaper, the Hourglass. She is presently the head of Environmental Progress UK, which is a pro-nuclear and pro-environmental organization. Hi, Zion. How you doing?
Hi, Gabrielle. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Wonderful having you on. You've become a bit of a celebrity in the pro-nuclear movement
A little bit.
lately. Okay, well, I want to start by asking you if you could speak a little bit about your experience with Extinction Rebellion and your views on the state of the climate movement.
Sure. So I was in Extinction Rebellion for about a year. It probably doesn't sound very long, but they're actually not that much older than that. I haven't been around that long. And I've been involved in the environmental movement pretty much my whole life, from when I was quite young, worked with my local Friends of the Earth group, was involved with climate camp, shutting down banks in Scotland because they're investing in tar sands. That was 12 years ago now, maybe. It brought me to Extinction Rebellion. You know, you might say that it was a natural progression, but actually I was kind of getting a bit fed up of those movements because I was finding they weren't very evidence-based. And the thing I liked about Extinction Rebellion is that the first thing they said is, we're looking at the IPCC report. You know, we're advocating for science, unite behind the science, all of this kind of stuff. So I leapt into that, and I leapt into the spokesperson role with Extinction Rebellion.
I've read a lot of Michael Schellenberger. You know, he's like the most prominent pro-nuclear person. And I've had sharp differences with him in regard that he just wants to boycott it. And whereas I see it as a productive, if imperfect, force for change. And I don't know, to me, I don't think nuclear power would be getting the kind of attention that it is getting if it wasn't for the environmental movement in spite of themselves. So I don't know if you could speak a little bit about that.
So my role at Environmental Progress sort of came about because of these conflicts in the environmental movement, which was that Michael wrote an article for Forbes about climate alarmism, and I was in there, and I actually hadn't heard of him before that. He's not as well known in Britain. I got in touch with him and said, you know, do you want to talk about this? And we had quite a heated discussion. I just tried to say, look, not everybody in Extinction Rebellion is alarmist. When people are, it's because they're worried and they want the best solutions. But I kind of ended up saying to him, look, I looked you up before the call and I saw your TED talk on nuclear, and I completely agree that, and I think it kind of surprised him. He went away and he wrote a book, which I feature in a little bit. Still, I'm really good friends at Extinction Rebellion, and I think they're doing good work in their own way, but it wasn't right for me anymore. And because I was a spokesperson, it wasn't kind of like I could just go into something else, especially not campaigning for nuclear. I had to draw a really clear line. So, you know, I just decided that it was time to kind of step away, but I wasn't sure what I was doing. And right about that time, it was right at that time that Mike, it was months later, you know, I hadn't heard from him for months. He pinged me and said, do you want to talk? And then he said, you know, there's this potential role as a nuclear advocate in Britain. Would you be prepared to do it? And I said, absolutely, yeah. I'm ready to focus on solutions. And I actually was thinking that anyway. And
Yeah.
kind of this is the kind of thing that I feel like actually not everybody can do it, and it's quite hard and it's quite controversial, and I'm ready to do it. So that's kind of what got me here. It's a very fluid process, I would say, very fluid. He didn't kind of outline what I do or don't have to do or believe. I mean, he knows, you know, he knows my work. He's made jokes about me being alarmist. But I think that's okay. I think that's okay to disagree on things, because overall we're very much aligned in what we want to achieve. And it's not just about getting nuclear built. It's about the environment, poverty eradication, cleaner energy for everybody. All of these things are very aligned on with Mike, and that really matters to me. So I know people disagree with him on many of the things, and I'm sure, you know, if I read everything I probably would do, but I just kind of say where we're at now, he's given me this great platform, and you know, I feel like I'm doing good work, and it is thanks to him. So
I think he means well. He does good work.
I was pulling my hair out in Extinction Rebellion. I'm not going to name names, but people and things. And if you saw that Andrew Neil show that I went on, it was all to do with that stupid 6 billion figure. Actually, when that was said, I had said, you shouldn't make up figures on television. Don't say that 6 billion people are going to.
Hold on. I just want to stop you for a minute. because I lost you a little bit. That figure, I don't understand it. I'm sure a lot of our viewers don't. So,
It's all over the internet if you want to watch it. It had so many views. This thing about Extinction Rebellion has said that 6 billion people are going to die, in our lifetimes. Where does that come from? And I sat there knowing I couldn't defend it because I knew that the person who said it had made it up. And not
that's
only that,
ridiculous.
but I had fought within the organization after it was said. I was one of the louder voices, along with a lot of the scientists, saying, you can't make stuff up.
You know what's dangerous about that too is that when the people don't die, and because there's a lot of young people and they get older, they're going to say, "Well, they lied to me."
To lie, because there's so many serious bad things, bad outcomes. There's no need to lie. And it's where all this kind of alarmism stuff comes from people doing that. I get it. I had to then defend it, and I sat there and I just couldn't defend it. So I came off looking really bad. And so they kind of said, well, we found scientists to support it. And I said, that's not how science works. You can't do that. So I was really uncomfortable. You see in that interview, I was so uncomfortable.
Well, let me ask you something, because I think I know where it's coming from. And he's not the only one, because his deep adaptation. I follow this stuff. You've heard of Guy McPherson, right? Have you heard of him? Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
the world has been ending in months for years. It's ridiculous.
That deep adaptation stuff is so depressing. I'm glad that I don't believe that, because imagine if that was real, if that was true, it's really just, it's so dark. We shouldn't align with that.
Yeah, but there's the other extreme. It's okay. It's not.
Yeah. Now that I just focus on evidence, I just look at what the facts are, communicate them. I'm happy doing. I'm happy.
I understand. I've worked with 350. I've worked with the Miami chapter 350. I'm a founding member, in fact. And originally they made no statements about nuclear at the time. I brought that up one time in a meeting, and it's like, you're a denier. I said, we didn't have that, but they're all free. They all know me well, so that they weren't out to slice my throat up. But I had to explain. Come on, guys. This is being overplayed. Started environmental progress. How much progress has been made so far? I know you just began, but what's it looking like?
Well, I feel like there's been a lot of progress since then. And the response that I've had to that has been amazing, actually. I think there are a lot more people who want to know what the solutions are. They want them to be evidence-based. But I think actually a lot of the people that reached out to me, and some of them very prominent campaigners, are afraid to go public. So they're very supportive. I expected to get far more. And I think 10 years ago, if I'd done that, I think it would have been much, much worse than now, where people seem to be shifting and a lot of the younger people are on board. And so I feel like that's really positive for the climate movement if it can be harnessed. And part of the thing that I've realized from talking to these people about why don't they come out and say it publicly is they're worried about being attacked by other anti-nuclear activists, some of them very long-term, often are long-term because they're kind of old school, C and D type people. And some of them are people I know, but I do know they can be very aggressive on this point. And so not kind of coming, not speaking about it. What I realized is that energy is there. The energy is just very similar with Extinction Rebellion. I always say, I don't think Extinction Rebellion did anything magic. I think they were just there at the right time, where there's all this kind of pent up frustration that people wanted action, people wanted to do something about climate change, and they just kind of funneled that energy. And I think it's the same thing now, where people want solutions and they want them to be evidence based, and that energy is naturally there. So I'm just trying to work out how to harness it. That's kind of what I see my role as. It's not just even just about nuclear, because it's a big topic, right? And everybody has a view on it. So I'm working on kind of dispelling those myths now and talking to people about those things now. But I definitely see it in the context of a wider kind of pro-science movement.
Yeah. I think it's the tip of the spear of the climate movement. I always look at it that way. So I know that you're connected with environmental progress. Do you have autonomy in Britain?
Oh, I have so much autonomy. This was one of the first things when I announced I was working for Mike, and I actually didn't know them, that so many people had such strong opinions, really strong opinions about him. I had people calling me from all kinds of, from XR, from other groups, saying, Dion, are you okay? We're really worried about you. And I was like, come on, you know that I'm resilient and smart enough. I've spoken to him enough times now to know that he treats me with respect, and that our values are kind of aligned, and that's important to me. Yeah. And it's actually, I don't feel that it's that different than being an XR, and sure, we disagree on things sometimes, but that happened in XR too. When do you always agree with something? When I check in with him, he just kind of says, you're doing great, just carry on.
Yeah, good.
They're always there if I need them. So that's great.
Yeah, I mean, we both know Michael's very controversial. And being autonomous means that you don't have to be constantly defending him. You could actually take the offensive.
Yeah, and it's so funny, because people do feel so strongly. They'll send me something that, like, he hasn't even sent it to me. They'll send me, have you read this? Mike said this. I haven't even seen it. Can you imagine trying to keep up with every single thing?
I know. No, I know.
It took a while before I even got around to reading his book, and people were asking me about it, and I hadn't read it, and I was in there. But
I know. I mean, how could you defend him? He's the only one who could defend him. I mean, I can't. I'm not in his brain. You're not in his brain, and it's a diversion. So it's good you have that autonomy. I felt that way, but I think it needed to be said. And that's why I brought up that question. So let me ask you this. As the pro-nuclear movement hopefully grows, what role do you envision of the relationship of environmental progress being with the climate movement, if any?
Well, this is kind of what I've started to do with helping to set up Nuclear for Net Zero. So the way I see it is there's lots of room for different groups focused on environmental solutions. And there's no reason that we can't be in alignment with the goals. But I also feel like branding doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't have to be an EP thing. I've set it up with Joel and Mark, but actually they've done a lot of the legwork. There's nothing that would tell you this is EP driven. Here it's just me, and I'm new, and I do have a very different way of doing it. But Mike's completely aware of that when he took me on. He wasn't like, I'm creating a mini Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you realize this. I mean, there's a lot of really pro-nuclear people who are very prominent and very active in England already. So even though you don't have a paid team, I mean, I believe over time, if not pretty soon, but you could get the support that you need.
So this Saturday, we're doing a beach swim up in Suffolk.
Whoa, cool.
Yeah, right on the site where Sizewell will be built. Beautiful beach down there. Going in the water, specifically I've told people to bring their swimsuits. I had this discussion recently with someone I put on Twitter about how the UK, so recently we had a heat wave and our turbines stopped blowing so much. So what happened? We went down from 20% energy from wind to 4%. We had to import coal. I can't believe we're using coal. It's 21st century. We haven't moved along. And I got a little bit attacked on there by some environmentalists who said, you're making a big deal out of a bit of coal. It hardly ever happens now. Look at overall. And I know that overall the usage has dropped. I know that. I was kind of like, but you've got to think about where this is coming from what I've seen. People are living by those coal plants. People have respiratory conditions.
Yeah.
People suffer. You might just be like, oh, it doesn't matter. It's over there. Imagine if that was here in this country. We wouldn't have it. It's so dirty. And it's not good enough. I was just going to say it's not good enough because we don't have to have it. And, it's quite an important discussion to have because we can be very Western centric and not even think about, well, what's happening to communities that have to live around these areas where they produce that energy. And so my parents migrated here from the Punjab in the 70s to northern India. And, they had a coal plant. They're shut down now, but people still have really severe impact.
Oh, yeah.
The worst thing is they don't have healthcare to deal with it either. And the other thing is a lot of them don't even have access to electricity. It's so shocking. And so that's what I say. I'm like, hang on a minute. You can't just say, oh, well, we just use a bit of coal. It's fine. We can rely on that sometimes. It's not okay. People aren't even benefiting. I don't know where the money goes. I don't know what the situation is, but I can see that it's not okay. And that's really important to me, that it's not just about, be great for Britain. Like, we have to think about what's good for the world. And we know about air pollution. We know that coal is one of the drivers. We know we've got to get off fossil fuels. And that's completely kind of where I'm coming from. And these discussions need to be had. And they're not being had enough. And they're not being had in the environmental movement. I was one of the loudest voices on it in XR. I think they're doing it more now to keep up. When I was involved, it was just like, oh, Zion's going on about that thing again. And I was like, no, this is the core of everything, this issue. It's a global issue. And climate change is going to impact. I have 200 cousins in India. It's going to impact them in their villages the most because they're already seeing the impacts of drought and it's becoming more frequent. Where are they going to get water from?
I know.
Someone said, they can have desalination. No, they can't because they don't have abundant energy. It takes so much energy. They don't have it. The UN report finds that even the cities are running out of water. Delhi's running out. People seem to think, they don't live like we do. A lot of the world doesn't. And that's completely the perspective I'm coming from when I'm saying we need to build more nuclear. We need to bring our emissions down because they're developing and theirs might need to go up for a bit if they're developing. We don't have a right to say, you don't get to do that. We did it. And look, we have everything. We need to be fair.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that I don't believe this thing like let's go from no electricity to fossil fuels to nuclear power. I think jump right to nuclear. I mean, we need to help these countries. We need to really help these countries do that.
We do, and I think it's really sad when I see things like doing this kind of initiative to help people in Africa, and they were building solar panels, and I was just like, I'm not saying it's not okay to have a solar panel on your roof, but that is not what we had. It's not going to run a hospital.
No,
Come on, let's be honest about what they need, the
it's
infrastructure for that
not.
to be built. Let's not sell them a lie and say, oh no, this is all the rage. And it was being marketed like that, and I'm really not happy with it.
Well, if it's far off and it's too far away and the villages are too small to build a grid to them or don't pay, something, that's okay. I wanted to talk to you or get your opinion about ecomodernism. I know that there's been some good news. The European ecomodernists are forming, and I'm excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is the eco-modernist soapbox. So, I always rant about this. I really want to see eco-modernism on the ground. I mean, because I want to see a coalition, for one thing. I want to see a movement with a wider vision, with a Star Trek vision. And eco-modernism has done this itself. I think it's kind of a lot of belief that it's really just a defense of the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you could talk on that a bit.
So that actually came about because the Finnish Ecomodernist group saw my article, my City AM article about how I was leaving Extinction Rebellion and I was going to advocate for nuclear. And they emailed me, Taya emailed me and said, can we set up a call? And why don't we try and set up some kind of collective? And I sat in a couple of those calls, people from all over, representatives from all over Europe, kind of talking about how we can take it forward. I think, it's really exciting. And it's one of these things that I was saying, there's lots of room for lots of different movements, so that if you don't identify with the direct action element of XR, maybe you can go Ecomodernist, or maybe if you just care about nuclear, you go to nuclear group. I think there's room for that. And I see it as a broader kind of way for people who are just kind of aligned with evidence-based solutions to kind of step in and go, this is a space for me. And one thing that I found is I had so many messages about how brave I was to do what I did. And I don't really think of it as brave. Honestly, I just did what I felt was the right thing. I thought it was interesting that, if people think that it's brave, it's because they're afraid to do it themselves. And I even had someone, quite a prominent campaigner, contact me saying he wanted to do it. And then he even wrote like a letter, sent to the press, and then he didn't go ahead with it. And ultimately it was because he's afraid of losing his tribe, I think it's really natural. I think that's a really natural thing evolutionarily. You lose your tribe, you don't survive. I think it's really important that there's a space to go to. And there isn't really at the moment. I mean, not here. Obviously, the Finns, they do have this brilliant eco-modernist group. So it's quite interesting to learn about how they've set up and how they've engaged people. And I think that's actually really important and a good direction for Britain to go in.
Anything. I mean, it's really this back to nature, what is it called? The appeal to nature fallacy. I mean, that's the root of all of it. That's really the root of all of it. Nuclear GMO. And I think a lot of people are fighting on a lot of fronts. And right now, I see one big area that I think eco-modernists could tackle, which could bring in a different kind of crowd, and that is vaccines. With this coronavirus, hopefully they will have a vaccine. You're going to have people who are anti-vaxxers.
I already saw polls showing that.
Yep.
40% of people won't have it.
What?
Yeah, that's the poll that I saw.
Is that because of they feel like they're rushing it, or is it they're just anti-vax?
I think it is, yeah. So over here, generally, people do have vaccines. The uptake's quite good. So I think it is probably the idea of it being new. And I think once it's here and people start having it and it's, they're healthy and they're fine, I think probably those numbers will change. But right now, even though everything's going on around us and everyone wants it to go back to normal, right now there's a lot of resistance. There's a lot of worry.
Yeah, no, I could understand that because the science is kind of being politically driven. But on the other hand, my last podcast, we had a philosopher of science. Okay, was a biologist on, and he was saying that, well, I asked him about that, and he said, well, if the World Health Organization, National Academy of Sciences, British Academy of Sciences, I think it's called that in Britain, I'm not sure. if these organizations, which have gravitas, was to say, yes, it is safe, then it would be worth defending. And I think it's a good cause.
I've actually been in kind of vaccine advocacy as well for quite a long time. It's actually where I kind of started out in science communication, because in 2015 I had a book published on green parenting, and there was a chapter in there on vaccines, and it caused quite a bit of controversy in that kind of movement, more so than I would have expected. I literally had people emailing me saying, you work for a big pharma, I'm going to give you a 1-star review. and I do have like 1-star reviews on that book, and I had people saying, I agree with all the other chapters, not that one. And I'd say, but it's the same scientific method that informs that chapter as all the others. I'm not arguing, I'm just telling you what the research says. That's what that book is. So I've been there because I had so much of that. I thought I need to learn how to communicate with these people. So I went back to university. I did a master's in science communication, which was invaluable. How to talk to different groups about different issues. And vaccines comes up a lot. And there's actually a lot of research as well behind it.
We're all focused mainly on nuclear. However, when you look in global threats, nuclear is one direction which is facing resistance from the appeal to nature fallacy. If you look at vaccines and you look at GMOs, especially the GMO mosquito, I mean, fear of these imaginary catastrophes is potentially leading into much bigger catastrophes. I mean, what if this was a mosquito-borne illness? I mean, that's a scary thought. That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
And like, we could do something about it, but people are afraid of they're afraid of the GMO mosquito. GMO. I was driving to Key West, Florida, where they just approved it. And the guy, I think it's from a law firm, they had a big sign up. And I wanted to take a picture of it, but I missed it. It says, if you've been bitten by a GMO mosquito, give us a call. Well, duh, they're all males. Males don't bite. I mean, it was so brain dead. I mean, you should see how big this thing was. I mean, but they're worried about that. I mean, God, I mean, the next disease vector is mosquito. We're going to regret that we didn't have GMO mosquitoes everywhere. And of course, the vaccines too. And the threats that we're facing, I mean, it's scary.
We've got a long way to go for sure.
Yeah. I talk too much sometimes. I'm here to guess, but but I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Fear. It always comes from fear. It's fear. It's really the fear that just ends up driving their perspective on it. When something new is presented, like they need to communicate it before you get China babies as a headline, because once that's there, it's really hard to undo. I feel like I spend a lot of my time firefighting rather than communicating amazing things that I want to communicate. I'm just firefighting because of those fears. So. But I don't think that's new. I think that's been there for a long time. I think maybe we're seeing it more now with the internet. But I remember when I was a kid with the BSE crisis over here, it was the same thing. The same thing has happened now with coronavirus. Very poorly communicated. People lose trust.
Is that happening in England? I mean, people are not wearing masks. They think it's a hoax. Is that
not so bad here? It's not so bad.
In fact, you've spoken along that line of all of this. I guess it relates perhaps to GMOs. I noticed you were talking about in your writing about agroecology, and
so put lots of money into it. It's supposed to improve lives for farmers, but it was experimental, so everybody knew that it all depends on what the data finds. But you had all the NGOs behind it. You had UN agencies, charities. They put lots of money and effort into it. Yeah, what they found is actually it made very little difference, and in some cases, I think it actually made things worse for the farmers. These are farmers in poverty. They really need this help, and all this money essentially has been wasted. All this effort has been wasted, and why? Agroecology, it rejects biotechnology, it rejects using hybrid seeds, it rejects irrigation. That's the problem, right?
Rejected what?
Irrigation methods.
Irrigation?
Yeah, that's so ridiculous, because that money was to help them. To help them to be more drought resistant, to be more resistant to the impacts of climate change, to be prosper, not to stay in poverty. And now the research papers have come in, and that's what they've said, and it's a huge body of research. you look at this paper and you just think, how did they even continue these experiments for so long? I think it's because they were ideology driven.
If I'm wrong about this, but I believe like they've been actually they've been actually trying to ban GMO seeds from Africa.
I think it is the hybrid seeds thing, right? And there's a lot of like really outspoken environmentalists on that, like Vandana Shiva, really outspoken. And maybe, some of those concerns are rooted in real things that are issues, but the overall kind of rejection of the technology is the problem. It's a real problem. What about all these people in these countries who need those crops to literally survive, like on a daily basis? Like my cousins in India, they eat what they grow. What happens when they can't? Because there are all these issues with increasing pests, more irregular weather patterns. I would think we need to use every technology possible to help.
Yeah, no, I could even see trying to use less water, but only if you got like, GMO crops.
Okay.
All right, that makes sense, But anyhow, I wanted to ask, how could listeners get involved with your work at Environmental Progress?
So I would love it if people found a Nuclear for Net Zero page. It's on Facebook and we post our events there. And if you're in the UK, come on down to our beach party on Saturday in Suffolk. There's going to be lots of events like that. And after that, I'll be looking at other events. At the moment, we're focusing on that because the decision to build Sizewell is really imminent here. It's happening kind of this month. That's where I'm putting my energy. But if you follow that page, all the updates will be on there. Otherwise, if you just want to follow my work outside of Nuclear for Net Zero, I'm on Twitter at Ziontree, ZIONPREE, very active on there. Love to hear people's ideas and love for them to get involved and kind of help to create these broader movements.
Yeah, that's great. Zion, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
It was wonderful. Keep up the good work, and we want to thank all our listeners. Stay well, and we'll be seeing you till next time.